I've got confirmation that the recording has started. So with your permission, Chair, I'll take this adjournment for the meeting of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee of the 25th of August 2021.
Yes, please, Pauline.
Okay. Councillor Allison, I see that you're here. Also, Councillor Anderson. I have apologies from Councillor Bradley. Councillor Brown, I see that you're here, as is Councillor Chalmers. I have apologies from Councillor Convery. Councillor Cooper, I see that you're here. And Councillor Craig is also here. Councillor Devlin is here, as is Councillor Dorman, Councillor Fagan, Councillor Faulkner and Councillor Hamilton. I have apologies intimated from Councillor Harrow. Councillor Horsham, you're at the meeting.
Here,
I can see that you're there. Thank you very much. Councillor Lockhart is also at the meeting, as is Councillor Logan and Councillor Loudon. Councillor Lowe. No, I don't hear anything from Councillor Lowe. Councillor McAdams is at the meeting. I have apologies from Councillor McGuigan. Councillor Miller.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Nealon.
Pauline.
Councillor Nealon, can you confirm your attendance at the meeting? No, I have nothing from Councillor Nealon. Councillor Ross, I see that you're here. Councillor Shearer.
Yes, Pauline.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wardhaw is at the meeting. Councillor Wark is also at the meeting. Councillor Wilson is at the meeting also. So just to come back and double check, Councillor Lowe, no indication that you're here at the meeting, and also Councillor Nealon. I have no intimation of any apologies for the meeting, so if anyone is substituting, if they could advise me now. No, that's great. Thank you. With that, Chair, I'll pass back to you for the business of the meeting.
Thanks, Pauline. I think we'll crack on. It's just to say that we have another interesting agenda this afternoon with some really good reports and some maybe not so good reports. So we'll take it from item 1, which is declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations? Yes, Cecil.
Thank you, Chair. It's agenda item 6, COVID-19 memorial tree planting. I'm a member of Friends of Stonehouse Park.
Thanks very much. We did ask for some clarity on this item, and I think it's up to, as usual, every individual councillor to make that judgment. But can I maybe get clarification from Geraldine if the actual involvement in this, it means that the councillor needs to leave the meeting for this item, or whether they can still say stay and have a part of the discussion if Geraldine's about.
Chair, I don't see Geraldine in attendance at the meeting, but I'm happy to answer the question. The sort of like the nub, if you like, is if members of the public could perceive that the elected member has an interest. So it's all to do with perception. It may well be that there is nothing that would affect the person or the councillor attending the meeting, but if the councillor thinks that members of the public could perceive that there is something, that there is an interest, well then they can choose to make a declaration, but at the end of the day it is down to the elected member themselves.
Right, we'll leave it at that at the present time then. Right, we'll move on then to item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Does any colleague have any questions to raise? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'll take it that I'll move the minutes of the previous meeting.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Very much. Move on to item 3. This is a monitoring item, Sustainable Development Quarter 4, the Climate Change Strategy. It's on pages 11 to 70. And I would ask Leslie Hinshelwood to give us a report on this one, please. Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
So the report, item 3, provides an update on the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy 2020 to 21 Action Plan at Q4. The action plan for 2021 was approved by committee on the 17th of September 2020. Section 3 of the covering report provides background on the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan, and the action plan is reported using Improve, and you'll find a full copy of the report at Appendix 1. The Improve report at Appendix 1 includes a diagram outlining the 3 themes of the strategy, which is Sustainable Council, Sustainable Environment and Sustainable Communities. And it also outlines the strategic outcomes. You'll also find a summary in the Improve report of the relevant global sustainable development goals that each of the theme contributes to at a local level. The report then provides the quantitative measures, both performance and contextual. The performance measures highlight progress towards each of the outcomes, and the contextual measures are not in the full scope of the council. However, they do provide a health check for the area. The next part of the report provides progress on the 2021 improvement actions towards each of the outcomes. And in paragraphs 4.2 and 4.4 of my covering report provides a summary on the progress on both the quantitative measures and the improvement actions. You will see that there are 4 performance measures and 23 of the improvement actions had some slippage. And the majority of these were as a direct result of COVID. 3 of the improvement actions had slippage that were not directly related to COVID, and paragraph 4.5 in the covering report provides a management action to address these. Paragraph 4.6 summarises some of the highlights in the Q4 report, and some to point out are the refreshed walking and cycling campaign that was launched with a think what you could get done if you leave your car at home theme to support uptake of active and sustainable travel. Another point to note is, despite COVID restrictions, the Countryside and Green Space team were still able to provide support to volunteer groups, which resulted in an impressive 2,380 volunteer days being recorded. As part of this, a survey was conducted with individuals that took part in the environmental volunteering, and 100% of respondees expressed a positive experience and health benefits from participating in the environmental volunteering. Also to note was the launch of Glasgow City Region's first climate adaptation strategy and action plan, of which the council is fully involved in its development and are partners of Climate Ready Clyde. So it's just to take the committee to note progress made at Q4 in respect of the actions and the measures within the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan at 2020-21.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. It's like an awful lot of the reports today, the great reports, but COVID has meant that we just haven't been able to do an awful lot of what we would like to do. Do any colleagues have any questions? I see Monique first and then Robert. Monique.
Thanks, Chair. Leslie, I think it's a really good report. Do you know what? So there's been slippage. We get that because of COVID and whatever else. But I think for us as elected members, it's a really honest report. So it's very clear. I think there's still a lot of fantastic work that's been done that everybody needs to be recognised for. So I'm not disappointed in any way, shape or form with the report. I think that we need to take COVID into consideration, and I think that there's been benefits effectively because of what you quite rightly pointed out, because of your volunteer days, and there's been groups that have set up that have been working with the council with litter strategy and whatever else. So it was just to say thank you very much, but I wanted to ask a question. So see in South Lanarkshire, when, say for instance, at my local petrol station, they've put in 3 of the charging points. See when they do that, because they obviously need to apply to planning for that, do planning then tell you so that you would then know that that's something that you could then capture, so that it would go in with our figures? And if not, can we do that then? Because it would make our figures look even better, because the stuff is actually happening.
So yeah, sorry, just to come in on that. Thank you to note about the report, and there is a lot of really good work done. And as you say, with COVID, that we have had more opportunity for volunteers. In terms of the question, we don't at the moment include that in our figures in terms of what infrastructure we've put in, but we can do that. We can ask planning to give us a note of, what has been agreed. So that's something that we could take up with the planning department and include that within our reporting. My understanding is that there is notification of where all charging points are, and that would include ones that are not within the councils, that they've installed right across South Lanarkshire. So that is publicly available, but we could start to include that in our numbers.
I would like that, Chair. How do we go about doing that? And it just means that it would make our figures even like they are accurate based on the information we had to date. But because I brought that up, that would make the figures better, and it would be a wider representation. How would we go about doing that? Is it just a case of Leslie does it, or do you need to? Yeah,
we'll find a way of doing that. We'll find a way of doing that, Monique, and we'll come back to you with that included. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Leslie.
Robert.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Could I very much agree with Monique about the positives of the report and indeed of the situation. Two things, if I may. One's on 4.5, which is the matter of new buildings and so forth. Now, it's regrettable all this is delayed until 2022 for the Scottish Government end, and presumably longer than that for us. Is there anything we can do on this one? Because obviously the technology and everything is changing as we go forward here. It's quite an important aspect. New buildings are being built, and we don't really want new buildings to be built without them being as efficient in energy terms as they can possibly be. Are we able to kind of advance the thing in terms of our either requirements or indeed consultations with planning applicants on these sort of matters?
Leslie?
Yes, sorry. Yes, it is an issue, and it obviously has been slightly delayed because of COVID and other pressing things, priorities that the Scottish Government has had. There's an element of scope that we have in terms of our building standards, but that would be something that would need to be made, or a decision made probably at planning committee, of changing that to a higher level. It is something that we've discussed with our planning colleagues and building and standard colleagues. The other ask probably is from the council up to the Scottish Government to see if that's something that they could bring forward that date, because I am conscious that obviously we do have new builds, and if they're being built with gas boilers, then we're locking in that carbon. It might be that the buildings have better insulation or are more energy efficient and are able to adapt easier to when we're maybe at a stage where we can utilise that current infrastructure and gas and maybe using like clean hydrogen or something like that. So there's possibly two asks there.
Thanks, Leslie. I'll bring in Michael. He may be able to add a bit of information to that as well. Michael.
So we're not hearing you. We're not hearing you, Michael. You're still on mute.
Michael? Right. We'll leave Michael just now. I'll go into Katie, and hopefully we'll come back with an answer from Michael. Katie?
Thanks very much, John. Just to say, I'm very interested in finding out more information about charging points as well. As a family, we're actually considering making the jump. My husband's maybe got the chance to do it through his work, but we would be in the position of not being able to charge at home because we don't have a driveway. So we've been very much looking at the public chargers that are available. That information is already there if anybody wants to look at it. So you've got ChargePoint Scotland, which is the one which shows publicly available chargers, which are currently free at the moment. And there's several dotted around Rutherglen and Cambuslang where I would be looking at, some of them being fast chargers as well. But there's Zap Map as well, which is really good if you want to look at that, Monique, which looks at all chargers across the UK. So it includes commercial ones as well. So I think there's real potential there for giving us that information. I read quite an interesting report on it recently as well. It was SPT and Futures, can never remember the name of that, Scottish Futures, which was looking about how we will probably, in terms of what the government are going to have to do over the next few years, look at how this landscape is changing, because obviously with the public chargers you do have to pay, but if more people are going to be using them, then is it realistic that we will be able to provide free chargers for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 15 years, because people are going to then perhaps be changing their behaviour to use free chargers rather than take advantage of the grants and so on that are available to get them outside their house. I do think it's really interesting. One thing that I would like to see maybe coming out of this committee at some point would be a link in with planning. I'm just thinking about some of all the new estates that have gone up in my ward, where you've got a mixture of roads that have been adopted by the council, but things that are going to be adopted by the council at some point. You've got private car parks, you've got factoring, and I think it might be quite interesting to turn around to developers and say, well, if you're going to put in a housing development here, are you looking at charging provision? And I think it really needs to be this mix going forward of publicly owned things that are, funded by Scottish Government, Transport Scotland funding, things that are funded by the council, and then what we should be asking of developers to make sure that infrastructure is going to be in there where it's needed, and it's not something that we need to look at retrofitting. That's all. Thank you.
So some good points here, Katie. Don't know if I told you, but my next door neighbour, I was speaking to him last weekend. He has an all-electric car. He also has a dog, and what he does now on a Sunday morning is he gets up early, takes the car to Shatlerrow Park, plugs it in, and then goes for an hour's walk with his dog. So he's really enthused about it. So the idea is getting exercise, and at the same time he's helping the environment. So, there's maybe a lesson in there for everybody. I wonder if Michael's able to come in on this now.
I think I'm back in. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes,
Yeah, apologies for that. IT let me down there. I caught the end of Councillor Loudon's point there, just about standards and applying them to new build. And I was going to reflect on this in my initial answer, is that there is a consultation has been issued on building standards, which on one hand is very technical, but is very pertinent to the work of this committee. And the intention, Chair, is to bring this back to committee for members' information and for comments as well. So to go back to the first point before my IT kicked me out, is that the building standards set minimum standards, but I can assure you our officers encourage and help where developers or individuals wish to go above those standards. So I would give that assurance that we try to push the envelope, if I can use that cliche, to encourage it, but we can't insist upon it because they're the national standards. But to be fair, I think the Scottish Government recognise the need to increase the standards, but it does take time to do that, and it does take some time for the industry to adapt to that, and in turn our colleges to ensure that there's a skill set to deliver on that. So it's quite a complex issue, but I've got the comfort that it's quite firmly on everybody's radar now, and we'll bring this back to committee for members' information. So it's quite useful for that question to be raised by both Councillor McAdams and the issues raised by Councillor Loudon. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks very much, Michael. Move on to David Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up on Robert Brown's point, now, Robert was talking about new housing and the standards that they have to meet, and that's very, very important. I accept that. However, there's another issue, which is retrofitting of houses that are already built or have been built, some Victorian right through to houses that were built in the 1970s that would certainly not go anywhere near modern standards. And it's obviously difficult to retrofit some buildings, especially if they are Victorian or Edwardian. It's good to see that Michael's back with us. Perhaps he could give us some information on where the council is with a programme of retrofitting or helping owner-occupiers to retrofit. Thank you.
Okay. Again, without sounding overly sycophantic, a really good point there by the councillor, because the vast majority of housing is existing stock, either older stock, and as a result, it's not always that straightforward to retrofit them. What I can advise Councillor Shearer is that the 8 authorities within the city region are commissioning work to understand the nuts and bolts of how you would retrofit across the housing stock. Across the city region, there's a huge variety of housing stock, but there's a lot of similarities as well between tenemental properties, ones built back in the 50s, 60s, post-war. And I think from that we'll understand the scale of the issue, but also the scale of the opportunity. And I think it's important that the industry see this as an opportunity, that simply because we're raising standards, it creates an economy in itself. It's green economy. It creates a supply chain and creates a skill set. But that also has to be balanced against fuel poverty and the need how we encourage that across all the sectors and not just for those that can afford it, if I can put it that way. So I don't have a direct answer at this point, Councillor Shearer, but I can again assure you that collectively across the city region, we're looking at how that's going to be retrofitted, the project's retrofitting. The scale for that, it will come back to the Cabinet. And then again, I think appropriate to bring it down to a local level, Councillor Shearer, in due course. So again, not a direct answer, but certainly something which is well on our collective radar. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Thanks for that, Michael. It's good to see that at least it's on the agenda to take it forward. Thank you.
Okay, David. Eileen?
Thank you, Chair. It was in regards to, I think it was Robert Brown that sort of touched on it first, and then Michael answered part question. My understanding, and I hope this is right, but Michael will keep me right, that if I picked it up, at the minute there is a minimum standard of building control, what people should do, what they can do, whatever, and that we actively encourage them, maybe to take a step forward, should I say. But if the builder or person or whoever decides, no, I'm just keeping to the minimum, there is not a lot that we can do legally at this minute. So I think it was Robert, and this is no bashing Scottish Government, it's no political, it's nothing like that. But I think if that is the case, then as a council and collectively, because we're all interested in such things, and I know it's, if I'm picked it up right again, things have been held up with COVID, but I think it is something, if they're actively working and maybe bringing through legislation, to change these standards, that it would be helpful if we could just say to them that we hope that they might, make it a more pressing matter, and so that it could maybe come forward a wee bit quicker, because I think it is very, very important. And the Clydesdale people will remember we had terrible troubles years ago with people building above pubs and taking it to the minimum standard, nothing that we could do. Then we get hit with all the noise levels and all the different stuff. So if I have picked that up right, and it's a case of at the minute the minimum is that, and there's nothing apart from trying to engage and encourage people that we can do, then I would suggest that we keep on obviously encouraging, but also in a nice way we should maybe ask that people at Scottish Government level should act actively try and bring this forward a wee bit more. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Your comments are definitely noted. Joe?
Thanks, Chair. I won't repeat what others have said other than really just to underline, I think, the importance of this as an area of policy. And I think, frankly, an area of policy where there could be a bit more imagination Scotland-wide, to be honest. I think we do have an opportunity here to create, and it leads on from a point that was made earlier about how this is charged for. We have an opportunity to create municipal enterprises that could generate an income for the council, take on the dominance of big energy companies, and also drive change in the economy and drive change in society and in consumer habits. And I think that, to me, is the big opportunity that I worry right now as a country that we are missing. And I think we've also got an opportunity to invest in microgeneration, because this is going to put an enormous pressure on the national grid, and there are other forms of generation which again could generate an income for us as a local authority and take on the dominance of the big energy companies. And the final point I would make is just I think Leslie mentioned hydrogen in another context in her remarks earlier. Certainly, you've got to get on board with hydrogen technology. I'm concerned that we had an opportunity a couple of years ago, particularly in East Kilbride, to be a leader in hydrogen, and it isn't happening. We're being overtaken, and we shouldn't be following where others lead. We should be a leader in our own right. So I think, if we bring some imagination to this, then we won't just lock in the reductions on the 2014-15 levels that are set out in the report, but we can actually drive wider change in society and be recognised as a leader. I think this is an area where we've got huge potential that we really need to tap into.
Thanks, Joe. I agree with an awful lot of what you've said, and I'm sure that Michael and some of his officers are looking at some of these ideas at the present time. So it's something that we obviously need to look more carefully at where we go with this. There's huge potential. Maureen, you want to come in on this?
Thanks, Chair. No, I agree with much of what's been said there. I just saw this morning when I was having my breakfast, I noticed at South Lanarkshire College I've welcomed a new Associate Principal of Construction and Built Environment. And I think that's good news, and that we should remember what our colleges in particular will be able to offer us and kind of putting together these projects, presumably and hopefully under the auspices of the Community Wealth Building Commission, which we're going to be meeting later this month. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move to recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks, colleagues. We'll move on to item 4, which is a Good Food Strategy Action Plan update for Q4. That's on pages 71 to 114. And I would ask Elaine Gourigeon to give us a report, please. Elaine?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the status of the Good Food Strategy actions and measure at Q4 of 2021. And you will find some background information in paragraph 3. As you might remember, the Good Food Strategy was approved by the Executive Committee in December 2019 and covers a 5-year period. So the strategy sets out outcomes and actions organized along 6 themes and 12 objectives. Action and measure to progress the objectives of the strategy are included in the annual action plan. So a summary of the progress report is presented in paragraph 4 with an overview of the status for all measures. And you will find more detailed information about each measure in Appendix 1 in the improved report. So as you know, the first year of implementation of the strategy was disrupted by the pandemic, and this is reflected by the number of activities with measures showing a red or amber status. In paragraph 4.5, you will find some of the highlights of the report, and I'll give you a quick overview. So all the preparatory work to meet the new food and drink regulation in schools was completed, including the preparation and promotion of new menus and training for employees. Some of the food education programs were delivered successfully despite the pandemic using alternative methods such as online courses, and healthy eating was promoting through social media. A council working group on sustainable food procurement has also been established to consider opportunities to source and serve more local and sustainable food. With the cancellation of food events and workshops planned with the private sector, funding was diverted to support other activities in 21-22 as outdoor market event or support to the development of a new local network for food and drink businesses. An increased number of people also participated in food growing with two newly created allotment sites, as well as raised beds, and through the development of alternative food growing opportunities implemented in partnership with community organizations. Moreover, further progress was made towards the reduction of single-use plastics, and campaigns and workshops have also been organized to raise awareness about food waste. Finally, new relationships and partnerships with community and third sector organizations were developed in response to the food challenges caused by the pandemic, and this led to the development of a new network of organizations involved in emergency food provision. In addition to these actions, new work were carried out to respond to food challenges caused by the pandemic, and in particular food insecurity. And you will find a summary of these activities in paragraph 5. So these are actions which were not part of the initial action plan, and they were reported by services and delivered in partnership with community groups and the third sector. So you may have seen the figures. So since the beginning of the pandemic, the number of people requiring food support has increased, with food parcels distributed by food banks increasing by 93.4% compared to last year in South Lanarkshire. So to respond to this issue, the community engagement team supported the existing community and third sector by implementing food banks and other community organizations. And people requesting support, including for food, have also been able to reach help via the Council Community Wellbeing Line launched at the beginning of the pandemic. Means were also distributed to targeted groups or cash payments were made. These groups include children eligible for free school meals, marginalized group and key workers' children, older people, sheltered housing tenants, and homeless. So this was done with the participation of several council services, such as facilities, housing, education, and social work. So, and you will find in Appendix 2 some example and case studies of these initiatives. With regard to employee implications, the implementation of the strategy is a key task of services involved in food-related activities. And about the specific financial implications, new action to tackle food insecurity and implementing following the beginning of the pandemic were identified under the COVID financial reporting. So I'd like to ask you to refer to paragraph 2, which is a recommendation to note the 2021 Q4 position in respect of actions and measures within the Good Food Strategy.
Thanks very much, Elaine. Again, it's amazing how much we've actually been able to do in spite of the pandemic. It really is inspiring to see us getting so much done. I'll open up to colleagues. I think, Monique, you have your hand up.
Hi, John. Thanks very much. It was just to say that, see on page 73, see when it said, it's under 4.5, see when it says a council working group in sustainable food procurement has been established to consider opportunities to source and service more local and sustainable food. I just wanted to know who it was actually on that. Helene, also, I was noting again, good work that the council's been doing with regards to the increased number of people that are participating in food growing from obviously the allotments at Fernbrae Meadows and Lammermoor. Hope I'm saying that correctly. It was just to ask the question of how were we progressing with the other allotment sites, how many of them, are there, and what stage are they at? And then the final thing was, it was just a point of note, and it was like for 5.5, the community engagement team have done an amazing job going through the pandemic. And yes, they have supported existing community and third sector by supplementing food banks, etc. But also, I think that we can't miss out the third sector organisations that actually were doing a fantastic job, that liaised with the community engagement team to then make sure that there was nobody else that was missed out, because the majority of these third sector organisations will use eBod Tapestry or whatever, they'll have a database of people they know that's vulnerable or whatever else, but, they'll have been wanting to make sure that they didn't miss anybody, so they then will have liaised with the community engagement team. So I just don't think that we should be remiss in actually pointing out that the reason why it worked was it was actually a partnership. It wasn't one organisation, i.e. us, leading. It was us working with the communities and the organisations to make it actually work. So I'll let you answer those questions. Helene, thank you.
Thanks. Helene?
Yes, thanks. So with regard to the working group on sustainable food procurement, so we have different services participating to these meetings. So facilities, obviously, procurement, SLLC as well, the economic development team, and this also includes the team liaising with rural partners. And then we have been inviting external partners as well for presentation, such as Scotland Food and Drink, the Soil Association, and Scotland Excel also participated, and SDP, the Supplier Development Programme. So these are the main stakeholders participating. In relation to your last comment, I fully agree. I mean, so the community engagement team have been able to support people through this organization, as you said. So they really relied on this organization. So they've been working with 16 community organizations or food banks to deliver the food. So it wasn't the community engagement team, as you said, delivering food, but this was done through this organization. And I think they've been liaising with them on a daily or weekly basis to understand the needs in each community. With regard to food growing, I might give the floor to Alistair because I think you will have more information, day-to-day information. Yeah.
Thanks, Elaine. Alistair.
Thanks, John. Yeah, with regard to the food growing allotment site, we have 2 planning applications being approved. One for a site in Burnhill, which will be raised beds, and a smaller site in Straven. Our focus now is looking for a site in the Hamilton area. And as you'll know, we were through the budget setting exercise, we were allocated £300,000 for food growing promotion, and we would look to fund a Hamilton site through that fund. But right now, the investigations are ongoing about where a suitable site would be. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
That's perfect, John. Thanks very much.
Good. I see no other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 5, which is an item for decision. It's revisiting the biodiversity strategy and biodiversity implementation plan, pages 115 to 118. And I would get Lisa Madison to give us a report on this, please. Lisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The purpose of this report is to propose a postponement of 1 year to the revision of the 2 council biodiversity plans. The Biodiversity Duty Implementation Plan is the Council's response across various services to our biodiversity duty. The Biodiversity Strategy is a partnership document which brings together objectives and actions from various organisations, including the Council, the RSPB and Nature Scot. Both documents currently cover the period 2018 to 2022. This committee recently received a report on the Council's progress towards biodiversity improvement for the years 2018 to 2020, some highlights of which included peatland restoration at Langlands Moss Local Nature Reserve, the opening of Fernbrae Meadows and Glen Esk community green spaces, and various new pollinator sites providing food and habitats for key species. Section 3 of the report describes the International Biodiversity Summit, which was to be held in China in October this year. This will set new worldwide targets to address the causes of biodiversity loss. Over the last few days, it's actually been announced that this has been changed to some online meetings in October and hopefully in-person meetings in China in April 2022. However, the Scottish Government has retained its original commitment, publishing a new Scottish biodiversity strategy by October 2022. Delaying the production of our new South Lanarkshire documents will allow us to reflect on and contribute to international and national goals. Therefore, we are proposing to create an interim plan for 22-23, which will cover any outstanding and ongoing actions from both existing biodiversity documents. There are no direct employee or financial implications associated with this action. As biodiversity loss and climate change are directly linked, there are many opportunities for biodiversity conservation to help mitigate the impacts of climate change, as well as it being necessary to help the natural world cope with the impacts of a changing climate. So I'd refer you back to section 2 of the report and ask this committee to endorse the delay of these two documents for a year and approve the creation of an interim plan to cover that period. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Robert?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Just a very quick point. I mean, one of the most dynamic aspects of the potential here is the arrangements made through local community groups, touching and echoing questions in the last bit, such as Grow 73 with a biodiversity corridor in Stonewall Road in Rutherglen. And I just wonder whether that could feature as quite a thing to sort of develop as much as we can in this interim report going forward. It seems to be quite a dynamic aspect of it, and one that's going to actually help to involve the community as well.
Yeah, good comment, Robert. Yeah, something
yes,
we could look at. Yeah.
Both plans do include actions for pollinators, so that's going to be an ongoing thing just moving forward generally. But yes, developing the example that Grow 73 have set is a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, Monique?
It was just a quick one, Eloisa. It was just to say that, see in East Kilbride, we've got an area in East Kilbride that's growing hemp, and obviously, you know, that's like a major. Well, that's great actually, because also that's even better than tree planting. So it was just to say that it was to point that out, and just to say that I think that we should try and catch that. It was also to give myself a big up, because I'm the first female in Scotland in over 70 years to have actually achieved from the Home Office their hemp licence. So hemp is something that I'm super keen on, and I think it's very progressive and dynamic, and I think it's the right thing for us to be doing. So it'd be good for other areas that we've got, when they were, obviously it was like another area when they were talking about the open plan areas that we've got, and we've obviously as a council we've got agricultural areas, for us to maybe look at instead of it just being green grass and just, you know, lying vacant, for us to actually look at growing hemp in those areas. And it means that we could actually get an income off of it as well. Because, you know, there's like in places in Edinburgh where they're doing hemp insulation. It's a big business. It was supported by Zero Waste Scotland for the guy Scott to start up his business. And there's different things that we could do, and it'd be like another source of income for us as well, because it is challenging times ahead, and it would be a small amount of money that we would pay out to get a greater amount of money in, and it would also be good from a green industrial revolution point of view. Anyway, thank you very much. Hopefully that'll help.
Well done, well done to you, Monique. I think it's obviously something I don't know very much about, but I'm always willing to find out more about it. So certainly, if we could send around some information, quite happy.
Chair, if you want a chat offline, I'm happy to chat to you about it as well, and pass on any knowledge that I've got, if that helps in any way. I'd happily meet you for a coffee. Okay,
thanks very much, Monique. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move a recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We move on to item 6, which is a COVID-19 memorial tree planting. That's on pages 119 to 124, and I would invite Alistair McKinnon to speak on this report, please.
Thank you, John. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for the planting of fruit trees in 13 locations across South Lanarkshire as a memorial to those who have passed away due to COVID. Section 3 of the report provides some background and discussions at the Climate Change and Sustainability Steering Group about how the promotion of alternative food growing and the provision of a memorial to those who have passed away due to COVID could be aligned. Section 4 confirms that there has been community interest in how the Council could recognise of the loss of life due to COVID, and paragraph 4.1 confirms that the proposal also provides additional benefits, including highlighting the importance of tree planting for the environment and future generations, increasing the level of tree canopy cover in South Lanarkshire, as well as other environmental, social and economic benefits associated with tree planting, and it also offers carbon sequestration. It also complements the work that is already undergoing in the Council's biodiversity strategy, and it also links directly into the aims of the Food Growing Strategy and Action Plan. Consideration was given to planting trees in each and every settlement across the Council area, However, a view was reached that it would be more appropriate to concentrate planning within a larger park setting, and the number of trees to be planted in each location would provide a degree of scale and presence more fitting within a memorial. On this basis, it was proposed to plant fruit trees in 11 district parks and our 2 country parks, circa about 60 trees in each location. A list of locations are provided in Appendix 1, and existing groups that Establish will liaise with is also provided if the proposal is agreed. Although there are no additional employee implications with regard to the proposal, staff will be required to be redirected to deliver support with any proposed tree planting across the 13 locations. With regard to financial implications, the 2021-22 revenue budget was approved by members of South Lanarkshire Council and Committee on the 24th of February, and in particular there's a package of investment totalling 10.054 million was agreed, which included a £300,000 allocation for food strategy support. It's proposed that £15,000 of this funds is set aside for the expansion of fruit trees in South Lanarkshire, with £12,000 being used to fund the proposal, with the balance being used to increase fruit tree provision within education and social work estates. It should be worth noting that as far as the provision of these areas, we do not see these being specifically, the trees being identified as specific memorials. They're areas for reflection. We would obviously monitor any memorials or anything that would put in and deal with appropriately. As far as we're concerned, the next steps are concerned, we would confirm a communication plan with the corporate communications, and you'll probably know there's already a view article being published. We would contact the 8 groups and South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture and the community engagement teams as far as discussing the proposals and taking them forward. We'll also look to continue to investigate the sourcing of 800 odd trees that would be required. And we would link to the Good Food Network and the food growing groups to identify groups that could help to manage the future year's fruit production in these areas. We would also speak to local schools and social work regarding the clients and pupils encouraged to take part in any planting programme and also be involved in the harvesting process. It's worth highlighting as well that early indications suggest that we won't be able to get fruit trees this financial year. So it's likely the planting won't be able to happen until 2022, but we would do that as early as possible. I would refer you back to section 2 of the report and ask that the proposal to plant fruit trees at 13 locations across South Lanarkshire is approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alistair. Obviously, from a personal point of view, I think it's very fitting, and I'll be interested to hear what other colleagues have got to say about it as well. I think Maureen's got her hand up first. Maureen?
Yeah, just agree with you there, Chair. It is fitting. I think it's a really good thing to do. I saw the View article and I just wanted, I think, Alistair, you're probably aware of it just in your remarks there, but people were already saying, how do families get in touch with the council to let them know about their loved one's name and everything? So I'm sure Tom's on it, but just to say, can we make sure that we get that really clear message out there about the memorial bit without it being an individual memorial? Yeah. Thanks.
Robert?
Yes, thanks very much, John. I think this is an absolutely great project. I'm very glad to see it progressing, and I hope, apart from the memorial aspect, which I think is also worthwhile, that it's part of a continued programme going forward. Some years ago, I met a guy called John Hancock, who's the Scottish Orchard chap, who's really the pioneer in this kind of thing. And I think you'd be quite glad to see just how this is developing across Scotland. The one thing I think is important as well, you touched on the children and young people aspect. I don't think it's a matter even just of the harvesting and all that. It's also the matter of them having an understanding of, if you like, edible fruits, if you like, in the context of the natural environment in the parks, because I think there's a bit of an issue about just what children know these days about what's available, what you should touch, what you shouldn't touch, all that kind of stuff. And I think this is just a great opportunity to fit that into walks through the parks and toddler things, all that sort of thing that take place in places like Overton Park and Rotherham. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Robert, for these remarks. Monique?
Hi, thanks, John. Alistair, it was just to say, it's like, so obviously like in Appendix 1 on page 123, then it shows like the 8 groups, and then obviously it's got South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture next to like a couple and then a few NAs. It was just to say that at the James Hamilton Heritage Park, there is a community, there's at least one community group that works out of there, and that's the Sea Cadets. that basically have got to do their, badges, and they contacting me to ask if they could do tree planting. So it's just that there's a formed group that we already support as a local authority by giving them access and allow them to store their equipment there. So they would be willing to help. The other thing is with regards to the Calder Glen Country Park, which I guess the same thing would fit in for the Shatley Row and the Lanark Clock, would be, and also by the Town Centre Park, would be you're right next to schools. So it's like the schools have got to do their Duke of Edinburgh, they've got to do various other things. It'd be good to actually just tie in with them, and it would help with the green flags that the schools are looking to either attain or basically keep, and then that would mean that would help us as well. And the other thing I was going to say was it's not down there as a place, but it is basically bigger than Cunningar Loop, and it is our second park in East Kilbride, as the second biggest park because it's 16.16 hectares. You have got Key Woodlands there, and it is a well-used community woodland, and there is definitely space there from a woodlands management point of view that you would actually be able to have an area where it would be able to have trees as an orchard. So it's just to say that I know that these are all planting that are getting done on council facilities, but it's a charity that own it and maintain it, and it's used by the community, and it's free. There's no charges or anything else. So it's like another place if you were needing space that definitely could accommodate it. Anyway, thank you very much, and that's great.
Thanks, Monique. I'll bring in Alistair, but we are being asked to consider today the list that's in the agenda. Alistair.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Monique. From our point of view, we put SLC as a contact because we knew they would know the local groups in each of those locations, like the Sea Cadets. So we'll take that up through South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. Also, from our point of view, and again, it's a comment that was made by Councillor Brown, this is just the start of a continuation of tree planting. Now, that will be tree planting, it'll be fruit trees. So we will be looking for other locations in at a future date. And I say we already have identified other possible areas, and Cunningar Loop is a possible area for out with the memorial option, if you like. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Alistair. We'll go on to Margaret Cooper.
Councillor Cooper, we're not able to hear you. Yep, Councillor. That's Councillor Cooper.
That's me now. Sorry, my battery was running out and I had to go and get a plug to plug it in. I think I like the notion of the paper, Alistair, and the whole idea of it. However, I wanted to raise a couple of points that a member of my group had raised. One was in regard to the article in The View, where we were really telling people that we were going to be doing something prior to a decision had been taken at this committee. So we were putting out, as it were, a decision that actually hadn't been taken. And the other one was in regard to the James Hamilton Heritage Park as an example, that people treat these memorial trees, etc., and regardless of the council's best efforts, quite often walking around that heritage park's like walking around a cemetery because there's that many flowers tied to trees and tied to the seats that are there, and all sorts of trinkets, etc., are being left, and that can be quite depressing for people. I understood that we had always made the effort not to put plaques on. We now no longer put plaques on trees or chairs or any of that kind of thing. And I said that I would raise these matters on behalf of David Watson, who doesn't attend this meeting. There are some concerns about the fact that we're calling them memorial trees, and the temptation, as Maureen said, that people are keen to get in touch to know where they're going to be, and they'll want to drape them with something or put a plaque up. And I wondered how you're going to deal with all of that. Also, David was concerned that the James Hamilton Park has got a significant number of trees, and he was disappointed that there hadn't been consultation with the local members if they were going in their area about where the best location could be. For example, maybe down at the museum, further along from the Heritage Park, might have been a better, more wide open space for them to go in there. So that was the questions really, Alistair.
I'll get Tom to come back on Tom Little to get back on the publication, Margaret. But I'm sure the information was put out there on the basis if it was passed by the Climate Change Committee rather than before the decision was taken. But I'll get Tom to come back on that first, and then I'll get Alistair to come back on the rest of your questions. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Cooper, because it's good questions to me. I'm going to tread on Alistair's toes, first of all, if that's okay, because if nothing else, it gives me a chance to pick up the point made by Councillor Chalmers too. The article in the View made it very clear that these were not individual trees for individual sad deaths. They were collective memory, and that there would be no plaques, etc. attached to them. I'm sure Alistair will pick back up on that later. In terms of the publication of the article in advance of the decision being taken, I guess I'd make 2 points. The first is, as the Chair indicated, the article was very clear a decision had not been taken. It made it clear that the decision would be taken by this committee and what the consequences of that decision would be if it was approved. Now, I took the decision to print that in advance for a couple of reasons. One is I thought this was probably not a contentious matter. That's maybe presumptive on my part, but the second point is very important to me, and that is a key part of my role is to promote the work of this council, and in particular, in this case, to promote the work of this committee. Now, we're now live streaming these meetings, and I need to do things to draw attention to the public, to make them aware that you're meeting and that you're undertaking the important business of this council. So by doing things like this, by flagging up interesting subjects that will be discussed by these committees, it gives me a chance to reach out there and get people to engage more readily with your work. Now, we already, of course, publish the papers a full week in advance of the committee meeting for that purpose, to try and make sure members of the public are aware of what you will be discussing. So I see this as a logical next step. By using my channels to promote that work more clearly, I can bring more people into that decision-making process and help you in your work. I actually think this is something we should be doing more of. I will do it with some hesitation, but I would seek your support in doing that.
Thanks very much, Tom. Alistair, do you want to come in on the rest of Margaret's concerns?
Yeah, no problem. I think that the concerns about the memorialisations is well made, Margaret, because we have seen challenges elsewhere. And I think it did highlight in the report in section 4.5 where we do have the policy that we don't create memorials out with cemeteries and the crematorium. And I think that's why, although we've called it memorials, because I think that's the way the public will see it, it is about creating areas of reflection, for people to be able to go in and visit, not to visit a specific tree, is to visit a nice secluded area that they can reflect on their lost ones that have passed away, and we will continue to try and manage that. That's why we're also keen to get links with local groups, because they'll have people on site as well, and putting that message out there. It's not about the individual, it's about the cumulative impact that unfortunately COVID has had over the period. So we are aware of the concern raised there, and it's something we will try and manage and monitor going forward. And again, I think that the other areas that you've mentioned, as I mentioned previously, we've got these 800 trees, but we plan and hope to plant a whole load more trees. So the areas that have been suggested would be applicable for looking at other planting at a future date for other either fruit trees or just general trees in general. So quite happy to take those areas forward. Thank
you. Just to come back, thank you, Tom, for your explanation. And I do agree that we have to promote the work of the council, because quite often people out in the wider community are not aware of a lot of the projects that are actually ongoing. And I agree with that. I'm just relaying to you the concern that was expressed by David Watson. Coming back to Alistair, I think it would be useful for the future tree planting, maybe to consult with the local members, and I think you should push the words that it's an area of reflection, rather than attaching the word memorial to it, because people automatically assume there's going to be a plaque or something saying something there. You know, people, they can't help it because they're used to going to cemeteries or to the crematorium, and there's a memorial garden there. So I think I would be asking you please to push the words of area of reflection, and a consultation with local members for the future would be useful. I think it's a wonderful project. I'm all for the tree planting, and I think we do need to have a memorial, an area of reflection and a way of thinking about all these people that have passed away in the last couple of years. So thanks for that.
We'll work with Tom's team to come up with a programme and a way of promoting it, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alec.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wouldn't like Tom to feel unloved, so I'll say that I support what he's done anyway, and long may it continue. What I was really going to say, a lot of Margaret has covered, but I think as well as the local members, I think the actual groups you speak to could be doing with a broader context. The ones you've asked are very focused on these particular venues, and I think the likes of the community councils as well as the local members should be part of this, because I'm quite sure they'll come up with different suggestions, and these facilities are for the whole community, not just necessarily the groups that have a specific interest in them.
Okay, Alec, point taken. Thanks very much. Joe?
Thanks, Chair. It's really just, as you look at the Appendix 1, and it is to reinforce that point that's been made, both the Town Centre Park in my own ward and Lanark Loch, there isn't, not applicable, there isn't an obvious sort of local consultation group identified in those cases. So I'm just conscious that it would be useful to kind of fill the gap, as it were, if we had, and it's a specific request in one area, to just have an idea of what you're proposing in relation to the town centre park layout, etc. It would just be useful to deal with that at this stage in the absence of one of those consultation groups existing. But I think, as Margaret Cooper said, in any event, we want to make sure that local members are aware of what's happening in their area. It just seems to me that there are two of those sites where it seems to be particularly important just to make sure the local members are aware of what is being proposed, the layout, etc.
Thanks, Joe. Alistair?
Yeah, again, from our point of view, we're keen, if we get approval here, we will speak to local groups where we think the trees should be going based on our analysis of the site, but we will speak to them to confirm that they think that's appropriate given the work they're doing in the wider audience. And again, I think, as we said in the report, Joe, we're keen to work with the community engagement team to try and find local groups that we can work with. And again, once we get that sort of more rounded, we would be more than happy to come back to local councillors to highlight the actual designs and the drawings of where the trees would be planted.
Okay, fine. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much.
Chair, could you just give me a second and I'll invite Councillor Dorman back into the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Isabel's away and decided to have her lunch. Smart cookie.
I think she's back. Councillor Dorman, can I just confirm that you're back at the meeting, please?
Yes, I'm Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, they will continue then. The remaining items are items for noting. First of those is item 7, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy 22 to 27, pages 125 to 130. And I would ask Leslie to come back in on this one, please. Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. So the report provides the committee with an update on the progress of the development of the next Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy. The work to develop the next strategy was approved at committee on the 17th of September 2020. So the current strategy ends March 22, and the next strategy will be launched from the 1st of April 2022. The next strategy will cover a 5-year period of 22 to 27. However, we are also taking a longer term view through to 2030, as this is a key date in terms of national climate targets and sustainable development goals. So we want the next strategy to accelerate the pace and scale of action, but also to set foundations for beyond 2027. Section 4 of the covering report outlines what stage we're at in the development of the strategy. We've completed the review of the previous strategy and recently completed the engagement sessions part of the development of the strategy. The engagement sessions has involved a series of workshops and focus groups across South Lanarkshire. The focus groups explored what residents and communities needed to live well in South Lanarkshire, their attitudes towards climate change, barriers for organisations or individuals to take action on climate change, and what the council should focus on in the next climate change and sustainable development strategy. The feedback from the engagement services, or the engagement session, is currently being analysed at the moment, and we will use the findings to help shape the vision, the themes and the key priorities for the strategy. Whilst the focus groups included people from across South Lanarkshire, it cannot be taken as representative of the population. Therefore, we intend to carry out further surveys using the information gathered from the focus groups as a basis of questions for these surveys. And the surveys will still be part of the development stage, but we will move to a full public consultation once the draft strategy is prepared. Paragraph 4.4 of the covering report provides an overview of the emerging themes from the initial findings. However, as the development stage has not yet been completed, these could have a bit of tweaking or a bit of change once the analysis is complete. The 4 emerging themes at this stage are around people, community and place, green economy and the natural environment. There are also some cross-cutting themes emerging, for example, communications and engagement, heritage and culture, and nature-based solutions. 4.6 of the covering report refers to engagement with councillors. There is an error in this report, and it should read that the development stage should include engagement with councillors, not that it has involved. And we are planning to hold a workshop with elected members that mirrors the type of workshops and focus groups that we've had with our communities. The details and the date of this session are currently being finalised, and members will be updated directly. Section 5 of the covering report outlines the next steps in the development of the strategy and provides an updated time frame. There has been a degree of slippage from the original time frame, and that was approved back in September 2020. The main reason for that is the engagement sessions took longer to arrange than first anticipated. However, we felt that was a vital element of the development of the strategies, having the engagement sessions with the community. Therefore, it was important to give this stage the appropriate time that it needed, and push back some of the other steps. The original time frame was an indicative time frame and had some slippage time built into it. So the strategy is still on track to be launched at April 2022. In terms of employee implications, the development of the strategy is a key task for myself, the Council Sustainable Development Officer, and my colleagues and the team. However, input from other officers across the council will be required, and support from resources in implementing that. In terms of financial implications, funding the implementation of the strategy will be explored as part of the development of the strategy, because we do need to have a financial plan for that. We were successful in 2 million climate emergency funding that was allocated through the council, and that will help take some of the actions forward, but it will also help to scope out some new actions and initiatives. The majority of that 2 million funding will be used to leverage in additional funds to help meet the outcomes in the strategy. And also part of the funds is used to bring in additional resources, one in particular to help maximise that 2 million and explore alternative funding models, including private investment. If I can refer back to section 2, the committee is asked that the progress on the preparation of the next Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy and the revised timeframe for completing this is noted. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. As I said, I've got real problems with this myself because I think things are fast moving. Some of the reports we've had in the last couple of weeks about just where we all stand as far as climate's concerned are really worrying. And there's only so much we can do here in South Lanarkshire. We really do need the backing of innovative ideas from both Westminster and the Scottish Government. And who knows, we all need to be looking at timescales that are brought forward rather than put out there. So I can understand the problems involved in trying to produce a strategy when we really don't know how other people are going to move and how that's going to affect us. But I'll open it up for other colleagues' questions. Does anybody have a question to ask? Gosh, no hands up. Okay, right, we'll leave it at this at present time then. I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Fine, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. We then move on to the next item, which is item 8, pesticide-free council motion update. It's on pages 131 to 136. And I would ask Colin Reid to give us a report here, please. Colin.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an interim update on the trials and actions to date. I can confirm that the trials are still ongoing and a full report will be submitted on the completion at the end of 2021. Ground Services, while committing to these trials, have continued to use glyphosate on the areas that we usually treat. We have, however, tried to reduce this, in particular in areas such as our grass verges, and hopefully that can be seen with a reduced number of yellow verges, which was sometimes quite common last year. We have also signed up to the Amenity Forum, and the Council is now a member of this forum. There's a toolkit available via the forum to evaluate trials such as ours, and this will also be completed and form part of the final report. We've continued discussion with ANAPSI and with other local authorities, in particular met with colleagues from neighbouring authorities to discuss their trials, as well as those in other councils. We have also completed the Scottish Government-led weed control survey in January 2021 and await the outcomes from this. We will continue to pursue these outcomes via the APSI Grounds and Streets Advisory Group. The full details of the 4 main alternatives are detailed in the report, so I wasn't going to read over the full description of these. Maybe mainly just highlight some of the factors to be considered within each of the areas or the alternatives used. Hot foam basically is what it is. It's basically hot water with a layer of foam applied to the weed. This then creates a blanket, and the heat of the hot water kills the weed. It doesn't, however, kill the weed completely. We have seen poor weed control and regrowth fairly quickly. Factors to consider are it's very cumbersome. It's a large piece of kit, has to be in the back of a vehicle with a 1,000 litre fuel water tank. It uses a lot of water, which is obviously a commodity. Increased CO2s because of the diesel heaters, and attached to our lands, so access is limited also. The hot steam is very similar, although this is a self-contained unit, it's not an individual unit. But again, similar to the hot foam, does use a lot of water, additional CO2s, and again, the weed control is quite poor. New Waste Spray is a new product, new to the market this year, and publicised as an alternative to glyphosate. It is basically a strong acetic acid. It does come with a number of hazards for users. concentrate coverage is poor, so it needs a lot of concentrate to actually be used. And again, the poor weed control, it's not been great. The Mancard low volume lance is a system that uses a concentrate of glyphosate fed through a hand lance onto a spinning head. So you're basically using the concentrate. However, the manufacturer states that usage of this product will reduce by 50% your concentrate used. It's a hand lance at the moment. However, the principle we're looking to apply to our quad vehicles and try that over the next month or so. We have undertaken these trials this year using existing staff, so we've diverted staff with current duties to support these, in particular hot foam, likewise associated costs with the system. Under Section 9, it should be noted that 2 of these systems will present additional challenges in the form of the significant increased water usage, as well as increased CO2 emissions, not only from the units, but also the additional vehicles. I would also say that we are still using the hot foam, and if any elected member would like to see a trial or demo of this, I'm more than happy to arrange that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Colin. Robert, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Thanks very much, Chair. As you know, I had some involvement with this, the start of this with the motion, etc. And I had the opportunity to see the hot foam trial that Colin was talking about. Thanks very much for that. I have to say I wasn't all that impressed, probably for part of the reasons that he was talking about. And I think the whole issue here is one of practical alternatives. When the full report comes back, I wonder if we can kind of look at this in terms of different sorts of locations, amongst other things, because what you do in parks and what you do in schools and things like that is different to what you do on the road network, I think. And I think there's issues like that to be looked at. The urban situation is different to the rural one. And I think we need to just look at what's available there. I came across a document which was produced by Pesticide Scotland, which I think must have been in response to FOI requests, which indicated that the actual pesticide use in South Lanarkshire was currently 5,500 litres a year, been static for the last 2 years, and gone down from 8,000 the year before, but only 4,850 previously. So it doesn't actually look as if, apart from the year of 2018, we're actually making all that much progress in reducing overall use. And I think that's one thing we should keep an eye on, the thing if these figures are anything like correct. Final point I'd like to make, if I may, I think the one thing that's not been touched on there is the actual, what you might call the physical cutting out of weeds. Now, I appreciate this is only possible effectively on areas where the pavement is in good condition, maybe recently resurfaced or whatever. But we've got a quite considerable problem, I think, with the seed beds that are provided for weeds by leaf fall, by clogged gutters, by blocked drains, all that sort of stuff. And I do think we have to look at it in that context as well, because I think there are places where physical cutting out of the weeds may be the alternative, albeit I know we've got to look at the staff costs of some of that. So just make those observations with a view to the further report we get later on, Chair, if I might. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Robert. Alec?
Sorry, caught me out. Yeah, Colin, nice full report there. I don't think there is anything in there that any of us wouldn't have been surprised about, that the alternatives to glyphosate won't be as effective and are significantly more expensive. But it is a process I think we do need to continue to go through in case any of the scare stories about glyphosate turn out to have anything in fact. The one thing that's not there that I don't think is there is the use of weed wipes instead of sprays. Has that been looked into? Because that could certainly give you far more control over the product that is being used. And secondly, some of these other alternatives then have knock-on effects in terms of climate change, heating and water, use of water that you've already identified, other things like that. None of them are quantified. And I don't think we should be going down a route of creating another problem or exacerbating one problem and trying to cure the first one. That was points I was looking for, Chair.
Thanks. Colin, you want to come back in
that? Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I can come back in the 2 points. Firstly, the point that Robert had made in relation to the physical cleaning. I didn't have that in the report because we do currently undertake that within the sweeping regimes, both on the large mechanical sweepers and the small mechanical sweepers. So we do fit the wire brushes to those machines, and we do try and clean out the gullies as often as we can to try and reduce the weed beds and seed beds that Robert refers to, and we'll continue to do that as part of our rationale in dealing with the weed issue. In terms of the use of weed wipes, for Alex, we didn't try weed wipes. Weed wipes, by their very nature, are quite labour intensive. You're basically treating the individual stem or the individual leaf. One of the means that we currently use, again, it's not in the report because it's not alternative, is that we do a lot of stem injection, particularly on our invasive weeds, which is basically what it says. It's basically injecting the stem of the weed to kill the hogweed or the Japanese knotweed. And that's a very effective control method, and it is only limited to what you actually inject. But we do mainly use that on the invasive weeds. In terms of the water usage, the full report will have that. We will detail full water use, etc., of everything we're trying, so you have the full details of any alternative.
Okay, thanks very much, Colin. Jim Wardhaw. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem. It's not just South Lanarkshire. This is Scotland, the UK. It's a worldwide problem. One of the things that struck me was flame control. Flame lances, are ideal for a lot of hard paving areas. The problem is that they use kerosene as a fuel. I'm surprised that somebody has not yet come up with possibly hydrogen as a source for fuel lances. That's maybe something that could be encouraged by councils collectively and the government, some kind of research into using hydrogen as a fuel for fuel lances, which is friendly in terms of the emissions, because it's only water that's emitted.
Colin?
Yeah, if I can just come back on that, Jim, we didn't go down the road of the flame lances ourselves because we're colleagues and other councils that tried that last year and this year. They found them quite ineffective, and again, you had additional CO2s from the burning fuel for the lances.
So that's why I was suggesting that maybe somebody should be developing a hydrogen lance which doesn't have the CO2 problem. It's environmentally friendly.
That's something we can maybe inquire about, Jim. Okay. Can I ask Katie to come in now?
Thanks very much, Chair. It was just to pick up on a point that Alex had made, and I was pleased to hear Colin saying that future reports would have sort of more breakdowns about water use and so on. When I first read this, it's quite difficult to picture some of this. I was actually Googling what a 1,000 litre container of water would look like, and then trying to imagine what that would look like in the back of a truck and so on. So it's useful to have the extra wee bits of information about, what average family water usage is and that sort of thing, and that comparison. So I would just ask that continues to be in there. That level of information is really quite useful when we're thinking about quantities of substances we don't usually think about, in day-to-day life. And would ask that, if possible, the same. So when we're just talking about increased CO2 emissions, it would be useful to have a sort of comparator to that as well. So that, would be compare that to trying to think about things I would know about a car or a bus or, something that would make sense. So that's useful to have in public reports. But thank you for this one, for going through
it. Yeah, thanks, Katie. Monique?
Thanks. Katie's actually done a lot of the things I was going to talk about. So, Jim, you answered that with regards to the water, so that's going to be detailed still, so that's great. I think Katie and I are on the same page with regards to, we were talking about, machinery that needs to be hired. So, to simple things like to actually heat the water. So, obviously, there's a cost for that, but for us, it's not about the cost, because it is, but it's also like, you know, about, you know, carbon miles and also the carbon footprint. So like for that to be calculated as well, please, Colin. And also I think, so thank you, but also with regards to what Jim was talking about as well, I like completely agree with that with regards to hydrogen, and I think it is something we need to look at more. I think that I can only speak from East Kilbride's point of view from being on the task force, but there was definitely a resistance from our officers in regards to hydrogen, and basically, like, you know, Holyrood, haha, I like it. Holyrood has pledged to give the hydrogen sector 100 million over the next 5 years in order to support a green recovery and a just transition to net zero. So I really think that we should be putting ourselves forward as a local authority to get more involved in that, you know, as we're basically like fighting against the climate emergency, and actually look at what Jim said with regards to looking at hydrogen, because it is lighter anyway, as well. I know there's downsides to it, like there is with everything. I do think that's something we should look at, and we could use the EK Task Force as basically a medium, because that was one of the things that they actually wanted to do anyway, was basically look at more hydrogen based things that we could use that would make a difference. What do you think, Colin?
I mean, the use of hydrogen is obviously it's something that's been discussed for larger type vehicles, etc. I'm just not sure how you would apply that technology to something like, you know, a weed killer or a weed burner, whatever. It's making the product, I suppose, using the technology, and I'm not sure how that would be achieved, to be honest with you.
Chair, can I just say, Chair, that, do you know what, Colin? I don't think you need to be the person that actually comes up with that solution. I think that's something that, like, using like things like the task force and basically us as politicians using what's available to us through the Scottish Government, that's something that we can actually drive. They can actually then complement what you're doing, so that we're not tying your hands behind your back and going, can you just come up with everything, and while you're at it, world peace. It's just like we can help you. That's something I think that we could actually look to help you as elected members.
Yeah, I mean, in speaking to APSI and other councils and those in the industry and the Amenity Forum, etc., it's not an area that's actually been mentioned before. I don't think I've not actually had that one mentioned or heard in discussion. As Jim said, the flame burners and the flame wipes are things that have been used before. Yeah. We were also looking at, previously there was an electronic type weed killer that basically only picked up the green weed as it passed over it. We have asked for a demo of that this year, but we've not seen it yet, so we're still looking at that as an option as well, but it's not in the report because we haven't tried it, obviously. In terms of the CO2s, yeah, I'm happy to include that within the final report. And we can measure that because obviously we have the equipment we're using, so we can measure the CO2s and the tonnages, and we can provide that information as well, which I think would be useful for people to see.
I think.
Thank you.
I think if there was any research there done, probably APSI would have done some research on the hydrogen thing. So I think it's probably worthwhile having a look at that to see if there's any research being done on it. Yeah. If not, I think it's probably up to some private individual, if they think it's a goer, to try and bring forward a project where they think it would be beneficial. God knows what that would cost as far as research and development is concerned, but certainly something to consider. I see Eileen has a hand up, and then Katie. Eileen. Can't hear you, Eileen.
John, I think she's frozen because she froze earlier on.
Right, I'll take Katie first and then we'll come back to Eileen. Okay, Katie?
Thanks, John. I think it's really interesting points that were made about hydrogen. I mean, this is me talking from I don't know, about 20 years ago now I did higher chemistry, but from what I remember about that, it doesn't seem very likely that this is something that somebody would take on to investigate, because there's all sorts of problems with storing. It would be liquid hydrogen under pressure, you know, if you were using it in that sort of condition, if you were using it in a sort of weed burner capacity. So then you've got all the sort of dangers of storing something that's that cold, and then it's highly explosive as well in that state. And as far as I remember, I think it actually burns with a clear flame. So I think compared to what we would usually use for a flamethrower, that would strike me as something that was really difficult to use without a lot of development. But interesting anyway. So it was just an aside. Let's say very rusty chemistry skills there. So maybe I'll be wrong.
No, that's interesting, Katie. Thanks very much. Eileen is. I see Eileen's hands down now. Peter.
Yeah, just on what Katie was saying there, I'm not a great believer in hydrogen. I think it's a hugely wasteful energy source that you use the electricity to produce hydrogen to fuel cars or buses or whatever. There's other ways of doing that which are less fuel inefficient. So talk about it. People see it as the future, but personally, I see it as a specialist usage item, hydrogen, and not something which is going to end up being a general use. So just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Jim, and NRC will try and bring this to a close. Jim?
As a former chemistry teacher, hydrogen has problems, so has every fuel. And the problems of an operated lance, I think, in storage of the hydrogen, no different from storing it in garages for buses or you know, we're even talking about using hydrogen as a fuel for planes. So I think hydrogen is a fuel that's going to be more and more common. And what Peter's saying about being wasteful, about using electricity, the problem is at the moment we've got wind farms that generate electricity, have to be switched off because we don't need it. And in future, wind farms are all going to have storage facilities. And the most convenient storage facility is to use the electricity when it's produced to produce hydrogen, and then use that subsequently in other uses. So I don't think the problems of using hydrogen as a mere chemistry teacher are particularly going to be problematical.
Thanks, Jim. Right, I said I was going to try and bring this to a close. Richard, you're the last person to speak on this, okay? Make the best of it.
The last word, eh? Right, I tell you, I am having a lot of experience, if you like, in dealing with weeds, and I've tried everything. There are lots of ways of doing it, and I sympathise with Colin, because the reality is, unfortunately, that the processes we've all been talking about, it's almost arguing about how many angels are dancing on a pinhead, because the reality is they don't really work. And the biggest problem is you got to do it again. They don't kill the roots. None of these things kill the roots. And unless you kill the roots of a weed, you got it again next year and next year and next year. And this is the cost for the council. It's repetition. And unfortunately, we're stuck with glyphosates or whatever they are, much as I dislike them myself, because that's the only thing that reduces the council's bills over the longer term. One area which I think we should look at, and I don't see it happening, is whenever anybody lays things like pavements or whatever it is, and it works at home, I've done it myself, is lay a membrane, put a decent plastic membrane under all the stones and the bricks and the paths and all the other things the council are laying, because weeds don't come through membranes for 20 years or more. And I think it should be part of a building or a planning thing, that when you're looking at granting planning permission, you look at actually weed prevention from the bottom up, and the membrane will solve a huge number of the council's problems. That's all.
Thanks, Richard. Did you say a plastic membrane?
Yeah.
Here's us trying to look at getting rid of plastics, and you're going to put huge pieces of plastic under every pavement in building. I was hoping that you were going to get a better contribution in this.
Well, I mean,
we'll take it into consideration.
Plastics are improving, and maybe in the end, they will have plastics which are less of a problem. But the trouble is you can't have a biodegradable plastic because it's not going to work. But it does work, and I'm just saying that it is an alternative. It will save a lot of money. Anyway, all right.
Okay, thanks very much for your contribution, Richard. I'm going to bring this conversation to a close, interesting though it is, and move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Is everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 9, which is the launch of the Climate Change Action logo, pages 137 to 142. And Tom's going to speak to this report. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Now for something completely different. I'm bringing before you with this report a new logo that we've designed to promote the work of the Council in terms of tackling the climate change emergency, and as importantly, to encourage appropriate actions by residents and others to do the same. So, as some members may be aware, one of the communication campaigns my team runs is a climate change communication campaign, and this is part of this. But I do want to stress, bringing you a logo is just a very small part of that campaign. It's just to illustrate some of the work that's being done. You'll see at 3.4 some of the things we've done recently, and indeed beyond that, we are in pretty much continual support of the sustainability team, and a lot of the things that Leslie outlined in the item at 3, we've been supporting her on that. And also we are looking at some communications around COP26. So it's just to make the point, this is simply a logo, but there's a lot more going on under the surface. So one of the reasons for bringing you this logo is it's not something we do that often. You know, we try and avoid logo after logo after logo. So this is not that usual a thing. And the reason why we've done this one is I think it illustrates the importance of the work, but also what we see as being the longevity of the work going forward and this Council's commitment to that work. So section 4 in the report outlines how we developed the logo, and I would note that 4.5, that a desktop exercise, quite an extensive one, was undertaken using existing behavioural change research to help inform that work. Now the results are there for you at Appendix 1. You'll see the logo in its own state, but also how it would be used in a variety of examples of other council materials for you to see how that would work. Now, I'd make the points that I think personally that it'll work really well online, and I can see it working very well, for example, in an animation format. And I think if we do it right, it'll be popular with the younger audience that we especially need to address and speak to on this and listen to for that matter. So I'm bringing you this logo to note, and I'm happy to take any comments or otherwise.
Thanks very much, Tom. Yeah, totally behind it. I think it's a marvellous logo, but I'll leave it up to others to give their comments. Monique?
Hi, thanks. I think it's a great logo. It kind of, you know, that way we say, you know, a picture paints 1,000 words. This definitely does it. And I think from an animation point of view, you can actually just imagine 2 wee legs at the bottom of it, kind of like running about. So I think it looks great. And whoever you've got in your department that come up with it, because I know you've kind of said it's like a full thing, I think you should give them a nudge and make sure somebody gives them a box of chocolates or something like that, because I think it's amazing. I think it looks really, really great. So well done.
Thanks, Monique. Eileen?
Chair, I'm sorry. I get completely thrown out there by my computer. It was rebooting or whatever it is that it does. You might want to take me at the end. I wanted to ask your indulgence. I actually had a question on the, what do you call that, the previous item. It's not a question, it'll not take long, but I would let you maybe finish this, maybe if you would indulge me.
Right, okay.
Let me go back.
Yeah, not a problem, Eileen. I'll take Katie first. Okay.
Thank you.
Katie.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to associate myself with Monique's comments, I think it's a brilliant logo. When I got these papers, I was Googling, this is the things you find yourself learning about as a councillor. I was Googling a study on what has been found to be effective climate change messaging and what's not. And it was lots of things on what's found to be something that resonates with people is something that just gets the emotional tone right. So you've got that idea that, you know, there's something happening here, it's clearly important, but not having it to you'll have heard of the idea of greenwashing. So people, if they think something looks too corporate, if it's not fun enough, then it's just something that people are tacking on. And if it goes too far in the other direction, if you've got planets on fire and things, then it starts to link into that idea that people can't do anything about this. Well, everything's going terribly wrong. So I think it's really good. And I think the idea behind it as well is absolutely spot on. Just that this will be on more and more things, because we know from being in this committee and being in other committees, the links climate change go into so many resources, so many areas, things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought about that you start to make connections with. So the intention behind it, just to start putting it on posters and start putting it on communications, is really good as well. So yeah, I would also add my thanks, Tom. I think it's fantastic. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Michelle.
Yeah, it was just to come in and to say a bit more about the communications and specifically around COP26. I thought that sort of tied in with what Tom was talking about in some of our earlier discussion about messaging. So Tom's been working with Leslie Hinshelwood, Julie Richmond and myself on developing a comms plan in the run-up to COP26. So some things happening over the next month or two that I thought members might be interested in, and they'll see appearing on social media, etc. So we have a website page going live on Wednesday specifically related to COP26, and that'll be a holding area for all our plans and reports and some other information that we're going to be putting out over the next month or so, and we plan to develop that page, and eventually that page will become our sustainable development and climate change page afterwards. So we've never had a sort of specific site, if you like, for our activity, so that's great news. From 4th of October, over 26 days, we'll be putting information out on social media, and each day we'll be delivering a message about what citizens can do and also what the council can do to mitigate the impact of climate change. So there'll be sort of 52 messages, if you like, over 26 days. And that's a sort of steady drip feed in the run-up to COP26. And Tom's team are working on an animation for us, which is also going out at the beginning of October. And we'll cover 10 things that the council has done over the last 10 years to mitigate climate change. So that'll incorporate all the big hitters around transport, energy, biodiversity, all that sort of thing. But we'll also point to the future in terms of the Scottish Government's net zero targets, and just sort of reiterating that message that, looking ahead as well. And finally, we're just sort of coordinating through Tom's team some of the activity that we're hearing about going on council-wide. So there's a business event taking place in economic development that's COP26 themed. There's also a video developed by Straven Academy that's already been out there, but we'll be putting that out again. So just to make sure that there is that focus of activity over the next month or two, it just seemed like it was worth kind of adding on to that whole issue around communication.
Thanks, Michelle. That sounds really good. It's where we should be going, and I'm so happy to see us taking advantage of COP26 to get this out. So more strength to your elbow. Great stuff. I'm going to take Alan. We'll conclude this item, then we'll go back to Eileen's question. Okay, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. It's an excellent poster. I'm just wondering, in 6.1, there are no additional financial. We will only get a claim for image rights further down the line on this poster.
Tom?
Sorry, Councillor Faulkner, can you ask the question again?
We will 6.1, it says there are no additional financial implications. We will only get a claim for image rights further down the line for this poster.
We get a claim, no, it was being created by my team from scratch.
Right, so there'll not be any costs later? No.
No costs.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thanks very much. Listen, I'm going to move the recommendations. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks, Maureen. Is everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. There's been no other business, so I'll go back to the item that Eileen was talking about. Would you like to ask your question, Eileen?
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, apologies. I did just get flung right out to configure the computer. What I had been going to ask, my hand had been up before that happened, is that I don't know if we've, and if it's been answered, just tell me, if we have considered putting out any publicity regarding, weed killing and what we're trying to do and different stuff like that. I've been taking a wee straw poll on people contacting me, and to be honest, as I sort of have and have, there's some people who would like you to do absolutely anything to get rid of weeds. They don't care what it is or what we're doing, as long as they don't have weeds. And then there's other, and they equally don't like us, cutting some verges and different stuff. So you've got sort of polar views, and then there's some who don't like the use of, the heavy duty weed killers and different stuff like that, and would be very interested in the things that we're trying to do. So I think for me, it was a case of trying to explain to the public what we are trying to do and the damages that, one opposed to the other. And I just wondered if there had been any work done to try and get that out to people, so that we don't have this. Some of the stuff that you get in either or side is quite, quite heavy duty, and that was my question basically.
Thanks, Irene. I'm sure when the report's concluded, it will have a lot of recommendations to it, which we can get out there. But I'll go back to Alistair and then Colin for an update on that.
Thanks, John. You've stolen my thunder there a wee bit. We would look at the final report promoting the outcomes of each of the tests. One of the reasons we wanted to give an update report was we said at the time that we would give an update report in October. So we can work with Tom's team on the basis of getting some more information out there and what we're doing. We're also piloting it in specific areas, so it won't necessarily be across the whole of the council area. So again, we can make people aware that we are doing it. We get a lot of inquiries in Eileen, as you'll know, people for, against, numerous views on the use of herbicides, and we're always putting out in the responses that we're doing a pilot, that we're all testing alternatives. So we make sure that message goes out in reply to actual direct questions. But I take your point, it's probably worthwhile maybe doing something with Tom's team just to promote the things that we are piloting before we get to the end of the pilot. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to draw the meeting to a close. Can I thank everyone for their attendance today? As usual, some very good subjects and some very good discussions on this committee, and thanks very much. I hope everybody has a lovely weekend. Okay, dokes. Thanks very much.
Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.